Hello and welcome to Have You Heard, where we explore the science in the news. Each episode, a group of us will discuss a piece of scientific news that has caught our attention and reveal the real story behind the dramatic headlines. For example,
have you heard that beer before wine and you might not be fine?
Have you heard best cure for a hangover, Sprite or a full English breakfast?
have you heard that hangovers are because of dehydration? Or are they?
This episode, we'll be discussing news stories that relate to hangover cures. Today we are joined by...
Hey, I'm Jason. I'm a PhD student here at Manchester, and my best hangover cure has to be cooking up together a bowl of chicken and vegetable soup and sitting there feeling sorry for myself, eating that while watching a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. A low point, but a great show.
And I'm Luke, and my first hangover ever, my mother tricked me into drinking a lot of milk, after which I threw up everywhere.
And I'm Katie, and my hangover cure is just a crushing, overwhelming amount of hash browns.
Hash browns, yes.
Good. Very nice. What's the record level of hash browns? How many?
That's just not a very fair question. It gets to the point that when I go for brunch and order hash browns, the waitress always looks at me with some sort of
like, oh, she's here again.
Let you know about that.
And
okay.
This hangover soup. What quantity of soup are we talking?
So I didn't measure it out at all. This was all just in the moment judgment, but I think it was probably at least 2.5 litres of soup. And so once that was ready, that was all I ate for the rest of the day. And I wasn't sure how it tasted at that point. I wasn't being able to have any sensation of what was going on. It was just nutritional, hydration. I don't know. I heard so many. Yeah.
Well, hopefully this is what we're going to discuss.
Yes.
This is what the important parts of a hangover cure are.
So I suppose the biggest question where we should really start is, what is a hangover? Because, well, we all know that it's caused by drinking a little or more likely a lot of alcohol, but what's actually going on there? Everyone has different symptoms of hangovers. I get a headache, I feel sick, I'm always tired, and I'm massively dehydrated. What about you guys? Do you get anything?
Yeah, I get a lot of being useless. I will just have no...
Everything's functioning at 50%, 40%, yeah.
Lie in the bed all
time.
day and watch a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine might just be the answer to this.
Yeah, maybe that is the hangover cure. Was it one thing I sometimes get? I don't know when it gets triggered, but sometimes I get the shakes. So my hands start shaking at the next day and I can't hold on to anything. And the worst that happened was I had a shift working at the cafe that I used to work at. And then I went into work and I was serving hot teas to all these old ladies, and the tea and the milk was shaking everywhere. But so sometimes I get the shakes, but most of the time it's that usual tiredness and dizziness.
I did a bit of digging to see what's actually going on. How can something as common as alcohol cause all of these different issues?
Nice.
So the main one is a lot of people associate hangovers with throwing up, unfortunately, and that is a direct effect in that alcohol itself, the physical molecules, irritate your stomach lining.
Okay.
It's an irritant, so literally substance against substance, and that results in increased production of stomach acid and a increased build-up of that in your stomach, which then needs to go somewhere.
And so it comes out.
You will throw up, and you'll get tummy pain.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
No, didn't know that. Okay.
Because I'd assumed that it was to do with your senses were all kind of dulled and things. I assumed that your body would treat it like a poison, get it out. Yeah, would try to just get to stop you from drinking alcohol but it actually physically irritates your stomach.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
It's physically irritating it, and in response to the irritation, you want to get rid of that, but also it's building up stomach acid. It's delaying the normal sort of process, and so you're more likely to throw up.
So that's how we throw up. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty gross, but there you
go. We've gone straight in,
vomit to some vomit, some word vomit, some actual vomit. Anyway, and then the more commonly known one is breaking the seal.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, we're diving straight into the interesting ones.
Yeah.
I've often been very suspicious of the breaking the seal concept. And
I've also been very suspicious of it, but I'm less so now that I've just done some research.
Okay, I want to hear this.
So ethanol, that's the alcohol that is what we drink in various concentrations, which I'm sure all of you know. This molecule is a diuretic, and that means that it makes you wee, and therefore that leads to dehydration. But how does it make you wee? That doesn't really make any sense. So it basically acts to reduce the levels of a antidiuretic hormone, which is normally produced in your body, called vasopressin. And so when you've got less amounts of this thing called vasopressin, you just need to wee more, because this hormone basically stops you peeing all of the time.
Okay, so vasopressin keeps the water in you.
Yeah, it tells you don't pee, don't pee, don't pee.
And alcohol lowers the amount.
Alcohol takes vasopressin to the side and it's like, calm down, mate.
Yeah.
It's okay, you don't
So
need
the
to listen.
vasopressin gets drunk, can't do its job anymore.
Can't do its job. It's like,
And literally breaks the seal.
It's Friday. It's 4, I'm clocking off early.
Yeah.
That is literally what vasopressin does.
So vasopressin is the biological seal.
Yeah.
So
Alcohol breaks the biological seal. So that is why you need to wee, on the top of the fact that you're drinking a lot
of volume. Yeah, the volume as well probably doesn't
so
help.
It's one of these things that's worth considering, is that you never sit down and drink pint after pint of other
Liquid.
pint after pint of water.
Yeah.
So you're already introducing lots of water to your body, and your kidneys are very good at keeping the right amount of water inside you. If you start throwing pints and pints at it, it will get rid of it. It's
Yes,
the only way it knows how. Because this was something that I found quite confusing when I heard about it, is, you know how you always hear throughout history, because when water didn't used to be very pure,
Yes.
they used to drink lots of beer and
Yeah.
wine and things, because
Lots of
the
ale.
alcohol would kill off some of the nasty stuff, and it would be safer to drink than
Water.
tap
Yeah,
would
yeah,
be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tap water was more of a roulette.
Yeah. And so I always thought, well, how does that work? If alcohol dehydrates you, then how can you drink alcohol and
Be hydrated, yeah.
But the idea is that alcoholic drinks, and I think unless they're above maybe 20% or something like that, they still have more water in them than you get rid of drinking them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the reason breaking the seal works is, what you tend to do when you're drinking is you'll drink lots up front. So say you drink 4 pints, then your body's got more water than it needs, so it gets rid of it. But then the alcohol stays around in your system, so you actually lose.
Yes.
Altogether, you lose more than.
Then you're actually getting
So if you
in.
drank a pint on its own, you'd hydrate more.
Then you dehydrate.
Dehydrate.
Yeah, you'd be grand, yeah.
But the alcohol stays around for a long time, so if you drink lots of it over an entire evening,
Mm-hmm.
then
So
by the time you
you
stop,
start off as being super hydrated, and then you end up being very unhydrated, dehydrated.
Yeah.
you're just throwing water at your body that it doesn't need at the moment.
Yes, yeah.
And
So
it,
it gets rid of
it basically becomes such a waster that it's like, I got all of this stuff, I don't need to hoard anymore.
Yeah.
But
So when the vasopressin stops doing its job, your body continues to just get rid of water, thinking it doesn't need it.
Yes.
It hasn't realised that actually you're losing water now, and you need to keep that.
Exactly. The diuretic properties of ethanol, therefore, directly lead to you becoming dehydrated. And there's lots of issues with being dehydrated. This is a main cause of your hangovers, as everyone always says. This is the most well-known one.
That's my kind of classic understanding.
Yeah.
And it's also one of those things that you very confident friends who claim that, I always just drink 2 pints of water before I go to bed.
Yeah, I always hear that, yeah.
And I know for a fact they've had
Yeah, you know they're hanging.
So that can't be all there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a lot more. It's just one factor of why hangovers make you feel so awful. But so, for example, when you're dehydrated, your blood vessels narrow because there's less water in there. And you're trying to restrict the loss of water from various different points of your body. But that means that you're getting less oxygen and less blood into your brain, which is bad, obviously, because you need to think and do things. And so your body goes, oh no, right, this is bad. I'm going to expand my blood vessels in my brain, in your head, and that is what gives you a banging headache in your hangover.
Oh, okay.
That is cool.
So it's not
That's how it
necessarily
works.
the dehydration, it's your body's response to dehydrating and responding to that response.
Cool. So the idea is that if you lose water, your blood kind of gets thicker and you've got less of it because you've got rid of water. So to keep your blood pressure up, all your blood vessels get narrower. And
Yeah.
more constrict.
Yeah.
Which also presumably means that, if I remember this correctly, in order to keep the same blood supply, your heart has to beat faster.
Yeah.
Which I assume is why you get
Which is why you get the
palpitations.
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 Ah.
And then I think the most common other one that's always sprouted around the brunch table as to why we're all feeling awful is we've got all of these toxins in our body. We've done it to ourselves. We made ourselves sick. And
I'll accept that I did do it to myself.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's all self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Or it's, no, I didn't do this to myself. You bought the tequila.
Oh no! If someone buys tequila,
It's on them.
yeah. If in fact that's my marker for the evening is over. If someone goes, oh, tequila, if I say yes, send me home.
Yeah.
I'm too drunk. But yeah, toxins
okay, so
is
toxins.
always this. It's a thing that's put around. That's
Yeah. So what is
never
the
defined?
Yeah.
what is this
exactly.
toxin?
Exactly. So it's to do with how alcohol is metabolized in your body. So metabolism of alcohol happens in your liver. You probably know this from all of the adverts that are everywhere. And it occurs in a 2-step process. So there's a enzyme, which is a funky protein, in your liver cells called alcohol dehydrogenase. And this converts alcohol into acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is toxic. And then this is very quickly converted to something called acetate by aldehyde dehydrogenase. And normally this second step happens really quickly. And so you pretty much very quickly get alcohol to acetate, and then it's excreted out of your body.
Okay. So acetate's fine,
Acetate's fine, you can deal with that.
but the acetate, the aldehyde,
Acetaldehyde, yes.
that's the nasty stuff. That's the
nasty
toxin.
stuff.
Okay.
That's not what you want. And so when you drink lots and lots of alcohol, your first enzyme is just about keeping up with that. And so you get a build-up of acetaldehyde, but your second enzyme's a bit slower. You sort of end up with this build-up of the middle intermediate because you've overloaded the system.
Oh,
and
I
so
see.
you're
So
getting
you
increased
can.
toxic.
It's easier to overwhelm the second step than it is the first step.
Yes.
So you get this backlog of
You get a backlog.
acetaldehyde.
It's sort of a bottleneck, yeah.
Ah, okay.
And that this is a toxic chemical, and it's building up liver. If you do this for a long time, you get liver disease. In a short time, you get a lot of the symptoms that's associated with a hangover. And then I suppose the last major cause of a hangover is what it does to your blood sugar. When you have a hangover, you're going to be tired, you're going to be weak, and you're going to be shaky. And that is because alcohol inhibits glucose production and build-up in your body. So basically, you get low blood sugar. Also, what's really quite cool is alcohol metabolism, so what we talked about before, results in the production of this chemical known as NADH. And this is a byproduct. And NADH, this is sort of like a chemical. This directly inhibits gluconeogenesis. So gluconeogenesis is it's making fats into energy, also known as glucose.
Okay, yeah. So it tends to be when your body runs out of glucose.
Yeah.
It'll go to use fats and other things to turn into.
Yeah, exactly. So it inhibits this process of gluconeogenesis at particularly one of the stages where you convert something known as lactate to something known as pyruvate. And this results in a build-up of the first one, lactate. And so you get this build-up of lactate, which is an acidic compound. So you get something known as lactic acidosis. So that causes
lactic acid,
Yeah,
I remember
lactic acid.
from... That's what builds up in your muscles when you exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gives you the pain.
That's what
The ache, yeah.
And so
pain.
that's achy muscles that you get with a hangover.
Oh,
it's
there
all
we
coming
go.
together. This
So
is brilliant,
exciting.
Katie.
So yeah, there's quite a lot out there, but definitely this is why you get the shakes, the tiredness, because it's
That's
basically
nice.
There we go, yeah.
You-
That makes a lot of
down all
sense
your
now,
energy.
yeah.
But how do we cure it?
Yes, so I was having a look online and I found a great one with the headline, Best Cure for a Hangover, Sprite, Scientists Claim. I don't know about you guys.
I love an article that ends in scientists.
The scientists
Scientists
claim.
claims.
So just take away all the responsibility of their research. But yeah, so I know that carbonated drinks and fizzy drinks and everything like that, that's quite a common thing to be used as a hangover cure.
It's certainly something I crave.
Yeah.
A lot.
A cold drink,
fizzy
yeah, yes.
Very nice.
Yeah, so I usually dive for something like Iron Brew. And I don't know if that's a cultural upbringing.
You stereotype. You.
Yeah. So there's always a couple cans of Iron Brew in our office because there's me and Tori, a Scottish scientist, in our lab. And whenever we're having a low point in the next morning, we've always got that stash ready for us. But yeah, so there's this idea that Sprite could be the one to go for. So yeah, this was an article I found by the Daily Telegraph with the headline, "Best Cure for a Hangover, Sprite, Scientists Claim." And so what they do is they look through this research and they found that a bunch of researchers in China went through several different drinks. They actually went through 57 different drinks to see how it affected this idea of hangover and how
Interesting.
Yeah. So what they actually looked at was this aldehyde pathway that Katie was mentioning before.
Okay.
So there is some basis behind that. The idea that you have alcohol that gets broken down to aldehydes. Aldehydes are bad, and then aldehydes get broken down to acetate. The idea is you want alcohol dehydrogenase to break it down from alcohol to aldehyde, and then aldehyde dehydrogenase to break it down from aldehyde to acetate. So when they went through all these 57 drinks, they tested to see how these drinks affected the liver enzymes, alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase. And of the 57 drinks that they went through, Sprite was the one that decreased alcohol dehydrogenase and increased aldehyde dehydrogenase.
Oh, so that's exactly what you want.
Yeah, so it slowed down.
Drunk for longer and less ill. I'm saying you should also mix your alcohol with Sprite. If
So-
you want
Perhaps,
a cheap,
yeah.
cheap night out.
So that would mean you've got alcohol to aldehyde is happening
At a slower rate.
slowly, and so you've got less aldehyde, and then on top of that you've got the aldehyde to acetate happening really quickly.
Yes. If we slow down that shift from alcohol to aldehyde, but then anything that does get built up as aldehyde, that gets quickly changed over to acetate. So out of those 57 drinks, this is what they found as this shift between potentially having a better cure for a hangover, so it helps with this process. And so this was really cool. The study was done pretty well in terms of trying to figure out how this was done. So the paper, the Daily Telegraph, did explain how they did the research. But what they didn't do very clearly was they kind of overestimated the benefits of this research in terms of this is the pathway that they looked at, but they never highlighted the fact that this was something that was done on a dish in an experimental plate. This wasn't something that they did.
This wasn't a human.
This wasn't something to do with humans. So the research paper by the Chinese research group, which published in the Royal Society of Chemistry,
Okay, so good paper.
good paper, good journal. So that stuff is fine. The research paper itself did say that this is done in a lab setting with enzymes and this kind of like chemical pathway.
So they were
clear on that.
that it has its limitations because it's not
Yeah,
in an animal.
but in this, yeah, exactly. It's the start. It's the first stepping stone to try figuring this out. But the Daily Telegraph in this case, they did overestimate the benefits of this. So in this case, they showed us who did the research. They partially explained how they did it, but they kind of overestimated the potential of this in terms of being able to do this in humans. It was
Which is fairly common.
Yeah,
A lot of science things that are done in a lab to make it sound more readable and more
yes,
exciting.
exactly.
You kind of extrapolate it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Big time.
Yeah. One thing I think that was great is they did try to get an extra outside reader to give an opinion on what this research is like. So who else agrees with this aspect of the research? And then they had something from a quote from the professor of complementary medicine at the University of Exeter. So someone in a UK establishment,
So completely separate from
the Chinese research group, and said that what the quote said that these results are a reminder that herbal and other supplements can have pharmacological activities that can both harm and benefit our health. So they've said that there's some things possible, but I mean, let's take it with a pinch of salt. So
Yeah.
it's nice that they've thrown it in there, but it's again this typical trap that they've always fallen into, saying that with the headline being over exaggerated, best cure for hangover, Sprite.
We currently have no evidence that it actually have an effect in a human.
Yeah, so it's I think it's one of these typical examples where the media reports it as an over exaggerated quick fix without the actual backing.
So I think let's just clarify there. So we know that it affects the enzymes that are involved
Yes.
in the sort of inefficiency of these leads to a hangover, and affecting them in these ways therefore would sort of counteract the hangover things. But it's important to notice that we don't know the active chemical
And you also don't know that if there is a chemical that's doing this, that would ever actually get to your liver. It's
reach where it
probable that
needs
it
to
would
go.
just
Exactly.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it never passes through. It just goes straight out. It
Yeah.
never gets anywhere.
yeah, I mean it's one of those things. It's a nice stepping stone to try to understand how this is done.
So In conclusion to what you're saying there is that maybe tonic is not the best tonic. Sprite is the best tonic.
Yes, yeah. There.
Nice.
Yeah, there we go.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
So gin and lemonade is not as
Yeah.
sort of uncultured as it seems.
Yeah. Another hangover cure that I saw that popped up on the headlines. So it was the one about how a proper fry-up might be the fast-acting remedy for a hangover cure. And
Oh, please let it be
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
very much
I mean,
that's true.
the number of times I've gone to Spoons for a breakfast the day after, or to get a proper fry-up, it's been the one to go for. But
I'm instantly starving.
so this was a headline that I saw, and I thought this was a good example to go through the Have You Heard infographic to try and break down the story that we see on the news and to try and pick apart where the science is and what's real and what's a load of bollocks, essentially. But yeah, the headline here was hangover cures. A full English breakfast really is the fastest acting remedy. So
Really is the fastest reacting.
Yeah,
one
yeah.
today.
so yeah.
Some big
Does it even
claims.
say according to science?
No, and this is where we find out. So if we read past the headline, we're talking about how they say that there's a study trying to reveal that a fry up in the morning is the best answer to fix that horrible feeling that we get the morning after a big festive night out. So it's picking on a theme that we commonly see in Western culture and across the world, that something like this might be the way to go to. But so one of the things that we always want to check out is who did the research. So was it a university? Was it an institution? Where's their reputation? Where's their background? And the one that we always like to look at is it from a commercial enterprise which is trying to scratch their own back?
Yeah.
So this one takes it one stage further. So this was a study in quotation marks, done by British Line Eggs. So the company selling the eggs have done a study saying that eggs and in the English breakfast is the best way to go. And it wasn't, and I say study very loosely because it was a survey that they sent out to their customers to try and figure out what their hangover cure was. So there was no link to where the research or survey was curated from and produced from. But basically they did a survey, and the survey said that they found 38% of British people chose to eat a fry-up to recover from their hangovers. And they felt that they recovered from those hangovers within 3 hours. So that's what their survey pulled out, which was better than 19% who took painkillers or stayed in bed all day to cure their hangover. So their survey from British Line Eggs found that a full English breakfast was the best way to cure a hangover.
There's
You've
so
gotta-
many issues with them.
Yes.
I was gonna say, they always kick up a fuss, Lion Eggs. They'll make a meal out of anything.
But what I find quite incredible is the fact that they've taken the survey and they've said that full English breakfast is the most popular option.
So they've really exacerbated it.
Oh, we're on fire.
There we go.
Nice.
Another one.
Nice.
Oh, I'm cracking
Yeah.
up.
Yes. So good.
But-
Desperately trying to do another one.
let's see if I continue and see what you guys come up with. So they do try bring in some sort of science behind this. They haven't got any references or research to back it up that they've found themselves. Just them
asking people, and they gave them 3 options.
I'm not. See, this is the thing. There was no link to additional information to try and find out where these other options
Just
might be.
Off the top of my head, if those are the 3 options, which are lying in bed all day, taking painkillers, or having a full English,
Yeah,
I'd say so. Lying in bed all day, it never helps. It's just
I can't
it's just
do it.
what I feel
Yeah.
like doing.
Yeah,
And I think if I actually got up and did things, I'd feel a lot better.
Yeah.
So after 3 hours, which is what they're judging it on,
yeah,
I'm going to feel worse if I've just stayed in bed all day.
yeah.
There's also the side of there's different levels of a hangover. So
Yes.
if I have a basic hangover, I'm definitely going out for a full English. But if I'm really feeling ill, I
Yeah.
can't go out for full
Yes,
English.
it's
So
a selection bias.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah,
only
exactly.
targeting people who are well enough to go out
Yeah.
for breakfast, in
And-
which case your hangover isn't that bad.
But there's no reference. There's no quote to say this is what works. My favorite line. So this is the Daily Express. Daily Express. I'm so glad I chose this
Never
article.
stops being funny. It's so good.
But yeah, the third to last line from this paper says that always use eggs bearing the British Lion mark, which guarantees they've been produced to the highest standards of food safety. So again,
Yeah, also, another criticism of this, even if they're trying to pay some scientists to say good things about lying eggs, the study doesn't actually support lion eggs being important. There could be any eggs.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we were to go through the checklist on this particular newspaper article, if we read past the headline, we're not getting that much extra information. We look at who did the research. It was a survey conducted by British Lion Eggs. How was it done? It was...
Badly.
It was a badly not well-informed survey. We don't really have links.
They don't give the information.
No information.
So you can't make an informed decision about it.
Not at all. And then, do they have anyone else agreeing? Which is something that we don't always see in a newspaper article, so I don't always think that's a bad thing. But
no,
to have...
It's a good sign if you can.
Yes.
But a lot of things are done by kind of new groups in very specialist areas.
Exactly. So
there can't be another expert to confirm it.
But to not tick off anything on the checklist, I'm not going to be a big fan of this. But
what was the claim of the title?
That a full English breakfast was the way to cure a hangover. So from this article alone, I'm sorry to say, guys, it's we can't make that claim. That's not the case. Generally speaking, what I saw at one of these end of the taglines usually says maybe less alcohol is the best way for a hangover.
That is very true.
Yeah.
Whenever you look up cures for hangovers, the evidence is quite dubious.
Yeah.
And it tends to boil down to, if you don't want a hangover, maybe don't drink as much.
Yeah. But again, one of the things I noticed is I'm not sure what they count, like, for example, in the Sprite one. I don't think it really said what kind of alcohol they used, whether they just used alcohol in terms of ethanol at 70% ethanol. But I imagine, like you said earlier, there's different makeups in the different alcohols that might have an effect.
This might link very well into what I've been looking at. So I've been looking at an article in The Guardian titled "Beer Before Wine Not Fine. Scientists Find After Vomit-Filled Tests."
Oh, damn. Oh, wow.
So you know they've done real science when they're just wading through vomit. The whole idea behind this was beer before wine and you'll feel fine, wine before beer and you'll feel queer.
Yes.
But so this is about how the order in which you drink alcohol or combining alcohol has some kind of effect on how hungover you might be. Or
Yeah.
So that's like an interesting point, actually, because a lot of people must think that from what I've just said is all of these things sort of stem from alcohol, ethanol. So how can drinking beer or wine make it any different, apart from maybe perhaps the different concentrations?
Yeah, I think it's something that's very commonly
like don't mix your drinks.
Yes,
etc. So what does that actually come down to? A lot of the hangover symptoms that we're so unfondly familiar with aren't actually all down to ethanol. Alcohol. So a lot of the tastier bevs contain things known as conjures, chemicals that are generally found in the more darker liquids rather than things like gin or vodka. They're sort of byproducts from fermentation. So basically molecules other than ethanol. So that can be like methanol, tannins, and these on their own can have their own toxic effect. So I think I'm letting some weight fall onto Luke there. I think that's got some science basis. So
well, let's see what.
So let's dive into the story then.
So like I say, this is an article by The Guardian. So they're covering a piece of work done by some scientists from Germany and from the UK. So what they did was they had some people, basically, they had some food. It was done based on their energy requirements. Mm-hmm. Then they got them drunk for a night. 4 groups.
Great study.
Yeah. It's I'd love to apply for funding for this kind of thing.
I'd love to be a participant.
Yeah.
Where do I sign? So they split them into 4 groups. Mm-hmm. One of the groups had some beer and then had some wine.
That was great.
So they got them up to kind of specific alcohol blood percentages. But the idea was about 2.5 pints of wine. No, you don't measure wine in pints. They had about 2.5 pints of beer.
Yeah.
And then moved on to the wine. Mm-hmm. Another group started on the wine and then had the beer. Mm-hmm. And then you had 2 more groups where they either drank all wine or all beer during the study.
Okay.
Then they...
Quite thorough.
Yeah. So they had them monitored overnight, and then in the morning, so I think they gave them one glass of water were allowed.
Yeah.
And then in the morning, they have something which is called the acute hangover scale.
Ah,
There's a
there's.
scientific measure of how hungover someone is.
Oh, wow.
Brilliant. So is it like,
it?
what is the acute
think-
hangover state?
I really want to use this next time I'm hungover.
So the acute hangover scale is, I think, self-reported, but it covers a range of symptoms such as thirst, fatigue, headache, dizziness, nausea, stomach ache, fast heart rate, which I assume is probably measured rather than reported, and loss of appetite. And they basically did this for the 4 groups, and then how much they reported in the morning. And then at least a week later, they did the same with everyone, except swapped them all round.
Oh, nice.
So everyone who did wine then beer,
So there's
then
no
does
individual
beer
bias.
then wine,
Yeah.
and vice versa. And everyone who did wine all night,
The beer.
beer all night.
Yeah. Ah,
So
okay. That's good. Yeah.
So it seems like a well
Thought out.
designed
Yeah.
experiment. And so what they found is that the order of the drinks, so all 4 groups, there was no significant effect. They all reported pretty much the same level of symptoms. It didn't seem to make a difference. One thing that is relevant, they did the experiment with beer and white wine.
Excellent.
So the scientists themselves that were talking about doing the experiments mentioned that it is very relevant that they didn't do anything that does have a high level of congeners, what you were talking about.
So they want to look at that, yeah, because
So they haven't done it with like dark beers or red wine or like dark spirits or anything like that.
Okay.
So that could still be a factor that plays into it.
Interesting.
But it's good that they took that into account.
They
Yeah.
mentioned that that's something they can't extrapolate to every alcohol.
Yeah.
But they certainly don't see a reason why the timing in the evening of when you would have those.
Would affect it.
Okay. But so the
So
research
that's-
came to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, they couldn't find any evidence that the order of what you drink when makes any difference to how hungover
And there
you are.
wasn't any difference between the people who drank pure wine or beer with people who
No.
mixed.
So they were the same
So
as
there's
well.
also, it sort of debunks the mixing.
The mixing
drinks is
alcohol,
bad.
Yeah.
At least in terms of beer
Two
and white
drinks,
wine,
yeah.
it seems to
Interesting.
be exactly the same. Because the thing they controlled was the amount of alcohol.
Yes.
So their
Yeah.
conclusion from this is that if there is an effect of mixing alcohol, it's very small.
In
not
the same quantity,
easily
yeah.
measurable.
Yeah.
Whereas what's likely to be the case is just the amount of alcohol that you take is
Yeah.
the most relevant factor
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
They also found that because they measured certain measures for how drunk people were getting during the night.
Mm.
I assumed it was at night time. It might have
Yeah.
been in the day. I don't know.
Just imagining
Yeah.
people in a lab and like.
It seems weird to get drunk during the day.
Walking down
It's
Canal
science.
Street on like a Saturday night and there's a scientist there just like...
with their clipboard.
So this is one of the things that I found quite entertaining. So they found that the order of drinks had no significant effect on intensity of hangovers. They conclude the most relevant factors are how drunk you feel. Makes sense. So their
Okay.
self-reported drunkenness during the night was heavily correlated with how bad they felt the next morning. which
Okay,
makes
yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of
like
yeah.
a
sense.
psychosomatic point of view. Okay, interesting.
But that's probably a good indicator of how well you can deal with alcohol
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how it affects you. So yeah, how drunk you feel, how much you drink, obviously, and whether you are sick. So they pointed out that they described being sick as a red flag for a hangover.
As if you're sick, you'll
If
have
you
a
are sick,
hangover.
you're far more likely to have a hangover.
Because I know
Which
people
makes
that
sense
say that if they throw up, they'll feel better in the morning.
The
Yeah.
old tactical chunder.
Yeah.
The tacky chan.
But I think it's, anyone who is feeling drunk enough to throw up is probably drunk
Enough to be
feel
hungover. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Looking at you, a lot of people who know who they are.
But yes, so that's what they did,
That's the research behind it, yeah.
and kind of the people involved. So it was a group of German and British scientists from Helios University Hospital, which I have undoubtedly mispronounced,
Apologies.
and a scientist from Cambridge University. So they did this study.
Yes, yeah.
The article is very good about explaining that the beer used in the experiment was donated by Carlsberg.
So a little bit of a
So,
commercial
yeah,
shout out.
Going back to the lion eggs
Yeah.
issue. But make it clear that they had no other involvement in the study.
Okay,
So it
yeah.
wasn't funded by them, they just agreed to provide the beer.
Yes.
So it's clear about what their involvement is, which again doesn't completely exclude them.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, yeah.
Completely rid them of any scrutiny.
Yeah.
But considering the experiment isn't trying to prove one way or another whether beer is bad, purely just the order you drink it.
Yeah.
in,
Yeah, it's not comparing between different beers.
it's unlikely that affects the results, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And the article I was reading on The Guardian so it didn't have a direct link to the article, but it told you which journal it had been published in.
Mhm.
So I found it super easy
To pick up and find later on, yeah.
the article and go through it, which I think is very good, and it's not something that happens all that often.
Yeah.
And I also found, so in terms of kind of who else agrees, that a very nice quote from an independent scientist, so a guy called Richard Stevens at Keele University. So he's a psychologist who's studied hangovers. So they got a quote from him. This is just part of the quote, but basically saying that the findings aren't a surprise. Hangovers are mostly down to the quantity you drink.
Mhm.
So he's kind of backing it up. He's studied this before, and it's to kind of confirm findings he's had in the past. So yeah, he has no vested interest in agreeing or disagreeing, but it's nice to see that in the article.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think then? I know a lot of people who solidly claim that mixing drinks is a bad idea. What would you hypothesize?
So one thing I have a little hypothesis about this, and that's that how different alcohols make people drink. So this was very controlled about, so they drank beer to a certain alcohol blood percentage, then drank wine to a certain alcohol percentage, and that was the study. It could be that if you drink wine earlier, more alcohol later, as in it's, I don't know, maybe it affects how thirsty you are, or
sort of like the pace of drinking you set
so
yourself.
it might affect that, or it might just be that because you're drinking wine early, you get kind of drunker quicker. Your judgment is impaired, and you go on to drink more during the evening overall.
Oh, yeah, that's a
So
good point.
all it's saying is that the amount of alcohol is what
they keep it,
predicted, and so it could be that there's something about, depending on what you drink early on in the night, it affects how much you drink overall. So you can't rule out, as always with science, we can't prove that there's no connection. All we can say is that currently we don't have any evidence.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. No, that's an interesting thought.
But yeah, people can definitely behave differently depending on what they're drinking during a night.
Yeah, I suppose maybe wine before beer makes you queer. Maybe it's wine gets you embarrassingly drunk that you then continue to drink to forget.
That could definitely be the case. So yeah, but for now, it's at least with beer and white wine, doesn't matter what order you drink them in, as long as you drink the same amount.
That's all we really want here at Have You Heard?
Yeah, no, it was a really good piece of work.
So after all that, what is a hangover? Other than being completely awful, it is irritation of your stomach, an increased need to wee, dehydration, the toxic build-up of various toxins, the expanding of your blood vessels in your head, the drop in blood sugar, and potentially even an inflammatory response. So all in all, it's not good for you at all. But it is more than dehydration.
And we've had a look at a couple of things that might be potential cures. Fizzy drinks like Sprite and a full English breakfast. Will they really help? Well, it turns out not really.
And if you're trying to avoid a hangover, it doesn't really matter what you drink, what combination. It's more about how much you drink.
So I'm afraid that we're going to have to really boringly end on please drink responsibly. And see you next time.
Have You Heard have a number of projects exploring science in the news. For more information, visit haveyouhearduk.com. If you have any questions or comments about the show, or a headline you'd like us to tackle, get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook at haveyouhearduk, or email haveyouhearduk@gmail.com.
Sorry, I tried not to laugh. I know you were doing your piece there, but I was like, look, man, what are you doing?
So, just as a disclaimer, Lucas just started pouring red wine into a Stella can.
I know it's disgraceful, but I don't have any glasses.